maybe we should. Obviously, adapting a book such as this was a major undertaking. I sort of, when I try to explain to people, if you haven't read a book but want a very rough idea of the story, because the film is very faithful to the book in a sense, but obviously with major updates. But if you would imagine when Bond is on the train to Montenegro and meets Vesper, imagine the movie started there, and then they arrive at the casino, and Bond has his sort of mission brief at the casino, what he's gonna do, who the chief is, and then things happens almost like they do in the movie, and then Bond and Vesper goes to Venice, where she decides to end her own life and leaves him a sort of a video recording, and then he has a discussion with M, where M reveals that she was playing for the other side, and then the movie ends. And that would have been sort of like the short and modernized version of the book. So then you get an idea exactly how much they added, both before the poker sequences and afterwards.
Yeah, because you do need to fill out that book a bit, because it's not exactly written with the cinema in mind. You can see that in the TV version, how things like Baccarat isn't really that dramatic of a game to follow.
Yes.
If you're gonna make it high stakes. The previous movies only used it as shorthand to show that Bond triumphs over the villain in the card game, sort of the beginning challenge of that rivalry by every movie. But as a center point, it doesn't really work. So you kind of understand why poker is brought in. Even though you're not an expert player, you do have some idea how poker works.
Yes, and I think that's one of the best. I still think that the most exciting part is the card game, and the filmmakers do a really good job explaining to the audience how this works. And in this case, Mattias is sort of explaining to Vesper and essentially explaining to the audience, because I agree. I mean, Baccarat was sort of a staple of the Bond books and the films, but ironically we never got an explanation how it worked. Even in the first introduction of Bond in Dr. No, Sean Connery is playing Baccarat, but when you watch the movies, you knew that Bond won, but you could never figure out why. But the essence of Baccarat is you're supposed to have two cards, and they should add up to 9, like a 4 and a 5 and a 3 and a 6, and tens and jacks, queens and kings are 0. So essentially you have one big decision to do, if you can draw one more card, you can draw a third card. But it's mostly luck based, even though in the book they sort of, Le Chiffre and Bond play each other's minds, I guess you can say. But in essence, poker is a much more interesting game.
Yeah, what helps the book to sell the scene is actually how you feel Bond's thoughts through it. We can see Bond thinking, he says this, if I draw this, it will come this. But you can't really have Bond monologue in any James Bond movie. Even if it's an inner monologue. You never had it before. It kind of breaks the whole idea of the movie, because where was this narrator before? Yes. So you need something more visual like poker.
Yeah, and I think in general, I think most people have an idea of poker, what's a full house, what's two pair, and so forth. So I think most people had a basic understanding, although I don't think a lot of the audience for the older films essentially knew what Baccarat was.
Not really, no.
Because it was sort of a specialized, very popular, I guess, back in the 50s. But you had a story, Ian Fleming actually sort of experienced a situation such as this.
Yeah, the inception for this idea comes from the fact where Ian Fleming, for those who don't know, was secretary to the head of naval intelligence during the World War II. And he was on a diplomatic mission to Portugal. And he found his way into a casino, and there was some murmurs and rumors as, oh, those Germans over there, those are German agents from the intelligence community. So Fleming had this drunken idea that he would challenge them, and would it be fun if I played the church off them and took all their money. In real life, Fleming did lose all his money. So in the novel, of course, Bond has to win. Yeah. Sort of a little revenge.
Yeah. And also, of course, the book is very much set against the shadow of the Cold War, and that wasn't, the Cold War was well and truly past by the time Casino Royale, the movie, came out. So this is very much in the shadow of 9/11 and the war on terror and the financing of terrorism, which was a great update. You buy it instantly, that Le Chiffre is no longer a Smersh agent, but a sort of a corrupt financial guy that's hiding, that's sort of launder money and for the world's terrorists, essentially.
Yeah, and he uses that to play on the stock market. I'm not really sure how the whole shortage thing works by him betting against it, trying to sell off and all that, but it's only a problem if you stop and think about it, because in essence, all you need to know, he loses money.
Yeah.
Which puts him in the situation that he needs to win it back before the organization behind him.
Yes, no, I wasn't exactly sure either, but essentially you bet on a company or a company stock going down. So it's the opposite of what you're supposed to do, because in the stock market you're supposed to bet on what you think is going to go up on the stock market, but this is the opposite. But we get the general idea. He wants, obviously he's staging a terrorist attack on Skyfleet, which is a fictitious airline. They're going to release their new prototype, and if the attack is successful, their stock will plummet. So all this had to be backfilled, so to speak, because the book doesn't have any of this. Bond just arrives in the casino. So, and that also gives space.
We do get a flashback in a chapter, because the book starts in medias res. Bond is at the casino. Then you get 2 chapters where the Station S, I think it is, a role within the MI6 hierarchy, simply put. Goes up to him, shows them, gives them all of it. So you do get the idea that Le Chiffre has invested Smersh money into brothels and all that.
Yes.
And lost money. But I think first of all, it's been kind of boring to have a scene where a couple of people talk. Le Chiffre lost money in this and that, and then not have Bond involved. So here you do get the idea why Le Chiffre is desperate and how Bond plays into it, because now Bond is the one who has put him in that situation that he needs to gamble back all the money.
Yeah. And I guess this could be a minor criticism of the movie. I mean, there's not a lot to criticize, but I always felt like Le Chiffre, he just can't wait to short that stock. So before the money is even loaded into the truck in Uganda, he takes out his phone, and within hearing distance of the other guys, 100 million, he short the stock. So he has this conversation with his stockbroker before they were even out of there.
It's kind of comedic. You can probably excuse it that he had this plan set in motion. He just needed the money, and Mr. White gave him that opportunity, although unknowingly.
Yes.
That he just, quick, let's get a move on.
Yes. And
speaking of phones, it's the only thing that is, the movie hasn't aged at all. The only thing that reminds you that it's a 20-year-old movie is no one uses a smartphone.
Yes. That's true. The technology always tends to age a movie first, but yeah, you still have those. Those movies, those phones that sort of have made a comeback now, where people want to break from smartphones. So, a lot of people actually buy flip phones now and whatnot because they don't want to be constantly online. So I guess it could sort of go all the way around and become modern again.
Yeah. The whole first act of the movie, as you point out, is an addition.
Yes.
And as we said, it helps to flesh out the motivation behind Le Chiffre, and you get to see why he's desperate and what kind of gambler he is, because you just have to accept that that's the fact in the book, but here you actually get to see it, along with Bond's arrogance and ego.
Yes.
He doesn't take it seriously that he's blown up an embassy. All he has to say to defend himself is, I'll shoot the camera first next time.
Yes, and of course, great action sequence with the parkour running through. Shot in the Bahamas, where they sort of built the construction site. And we
actually, no, they didn't build a construction site. Here's another fun anecdote. That's an abandoned hotel that was being constructed.
Yes, sorry, you're right.
In the 60s, and it was meant to be an extension to the hotel that Bond stays in Thunderball. So it's an old location, actually.
I think
they also used it If you remember Spy Who Loved Me, you have this great overhead shot of the Leparos model swallowing the submarine.
Mm-hmm.
That's from one of the unfinished floors. So it is an unfinished hotel extension that is now owned by the military.
Yeah, I think that is. I think they brought in cranes. I read in the book Some Kind of Hero that there was a big hurricane and whatnot. So all the cranes had to be the ones that were supposed to use had to be used to sort of clean up all the debris. So they actually had to ship in cranes from the UK. But again, great action sequence. Not a lot of CGI. Obviously, there was wire removal and whatnot from when I jumped from crane to crane. But it's actually, believe it or not, the first sort of foot chase in a Bond movie.
Yeah, to that, not really. You do have in Living Daylights him running on the rooftops in Tangiers. But it's one of the first times you have free running in an action movie. I think that's probably why you get mixed up there.
No, I think it's actually a quote from the screenwriters, because I listened to the commentary track and they said that it was the first foot chase in a Bond. And I was just thinking back, and no, that could be right.
Well, they chase him on foot in Living Daylights. I watched it recently. But then again, it's also a gunfight. They chase him, so it's not a one-on-one. So it probably, in that context,
probably
it's the
what
first
we're getting at.
One-on-one foot chest. Foot chest? No. Yeah, so in that context, probably a one-on-one foot chase, no shootouts.
Yes. So obviously, I guess this is a callback to give, the Brosnan era had a lot of major, huge set pieces, and I guess it's sort of also a way to get that audience their action kick, because obviously come the main part of the film there will be action, but it's mostly dialogue and talking. So I guess this first sequence is sort of out of the Pierce Brosnan mold of Bond.
Yeah, bit Pierce Brosnan, a bit also they kind of used this a lot back in the day. They took something that was new and modern and tried to implement it in an action scene. You get the wet bike in Spy Who Loved Me. It doesn't really have an action scene, but it's a gadget to bring in. You got the bungee jump in GoldenEye. You have the ski jumps. You have the snowboard in View to a Kill. So it kind of goes along with free running was hitting its stride and reaching its peak popularity back in 2006. And the guy that then Bond is actually chasing is one of the inventors of parkour.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. It's a terrific sequence, very, very original, and of course,
I think it's the action highlight of the movie for me.
I think you're right.
There is great action, but that's the most spectacular. The one thing you instantly think of when I say action scene Casino Royale.
Yeah,
it's running around on that construction site.
Obviously, in the book, there is a callback. There still is a thing in the book that you need 2 kills to achieve your 00 status, which of course we see in the beginning of the movie in this black and white sequence. But so it's really kind of a nice way to backfill, showing something that Bond talks about in the book, but we never actually get to experience.
Funny thing in the book is 2 different kills, of course. What makes it kind of fun is that the funny thing about the second kill that he has to do to become a 00 in the books takes place in Stockholm, where he shoots, I think it's a Norwegian double agent.
So it's obviously then the whole action sequence at the airport created specifically for the film, of course. And then we get...
Fun fact for movie fans out there, there's a specific reason why the ground is wet. Which, if once you notice, you will notice it every time it happens. Most night shoots always have wet pavements and ground. And that is simply a trick to help the lights. So it's always rained recently in a night shoot.
That's true. And as you say, it's something, once you get told that, you can never not see it. Because I never thought about it until I saw a cinematographer once wetting down a pavement. And I was like, why are you doing that? But no, that's absolutely one of the old tricks of cinematography. It just makes things look more alive, more beautiful.
Yeah, that whole airport sequence is also kind of an action highlight. You do get I do get the feeling that the tanker part of it is kind of a reference and homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark, because you do get that jumping in the driver cabin, punching each other, almost falling out, getting run over. And it also ends on that nice note where Bond has put the detonator on the terrorist, and the terrorist thinks he's going to blow up the whole tanker, Bond and everyone.
Yeah.
And notice the keyring is beeping on him.
Yeah.
And they hold on Daniel Craig's face as the explosion goes off, and you see that happy little smirk that, haha, gotcha.
Great sequence. And then, of course, Bond reunites with M. And we have essentially, I guess, a delayed mission briefing, because usually in the Bond formula you will get that in after the title sequence, but here is slightly delayed, and he gets his tracker, of course, which will come into play later.
It's funny that you mentioned the Bond formula, because one of the critiques back in the day was how much this movie, they said that it's strayed from the Bond formula, but it doesn't much stray as they do play around. Mm-hmm. As you point out, this is where the traditional briefing scene with M comes, where we're out in the field. It's as a consequence of Bond's action and kickstarts the actual plot that comes from the book. Mm-hmm. And also you do get, like you point out, the ship here, which if you could have in a subtle way introduced Q and called that guy the Quartermaster and played up his role in a later movie, but I kind of think that Q and Moneypenny are a bit intrusive for this kind of story that they are telling. Mm-hmm. Because then it is two more relationships you have to establish. The important relationship you need in this movie is M and Vespa. Mm-hmm. And having those two, I kind of think will clash with the flow of the story. I don't know how you feel about not having Moneypenny for the first time in the series and no Q for the first time since Live and Let Die.
Yeah, I never missed them at all, actually. If I remember the book correctly, there is a reference to Q. We never get to meet him, but there is a reference, I believe, to the Quartermaster. But as you said, you could easily have written Q into the movie where they meet up and he gets his tracker, or in the parking lot outside the casino where Bond gets his Aston Martin. But I think it's to the movie's credit that they chose not to include that, which I think maybe was a scary decision also, because that's also a staple of the Bond series. You have the Q scene with the gadgets, and you still have a little bit of gadgets here, but we don't get this comedic with flying couches and lasers shooting.
Yeah, maybe there's one point contention I've read about people nitpicking this movie is how does Vespa know how the EKG and all that works later on? Could have been explained if you'd like with a Q scene, like you point out on the parking lot, him going through, this is your car, this is what we have here. But I kind of feel if you have Q in the field like that, it's intrusive to the role that Mathis plays. Mm-hmm. Because as he points out, there is no us here, it's only me.
And I guess it's here where the sort of the movie and the book converge, of course. There are, in the book and in the movie, there are attempts at Bond's life.
Yeah, we do get two in the movie and one in the book. And it's also one of those, you need to update it, because as we saw in that TV episode, that cane gun, to use a Fleming quote, reads better than it lives. It's a tense moment in the book. But in that TV episode, you look silly with him going with his hand all the way back here. Hello, Mr. Bond, you are going to die.
Yeah. For those who hasn't read the book, there is a scene in the Buck game where Bond is winning it all, and he feels something pushing on his back, and it's one of the henchmen of Le Chiffre pointing a gun in the shape of a cane in his lower spine, I believe. But Bond sort of like pushes himself backwards, and it's sort of like the guy runs away.
Yeah, we do also get a tense scene that's added to the events where the African freedom fighters comes to confront Le Chiffre about where their money are. And a really tense scene where, which is kind of unusual, the Bond villain is under threat from enemy forces. And Bond has to, try and not necessarily save him, but he's there to, spy on him and realize, oh shit, something's going on. And in the end, he takes care of the threat that is directed towards Le Chiffre in a pretty brutal action sequence that kind of reminds me of the confrontation between Bond and Red Grant in From Russia with Love.
That's true. And I think that scene serves sort of two purposes. One, we do get a little bit of an action fix, so it's not just card games, but it also helps bring Bond and Vesper closer together, because in a movie like this, it's not enough for people to just sit around and talk about their emotions and stuff. So she actually gets to help out as well. She grabs the gun from one of the henchmen, and so she does help out. And then we have also the scene in the shower where she's sort of shaken up. So it's a really nice way of bringing those two characters together, if we're talking like from a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah, and it's also on that emotional part, it boils down to the theme about Bond's humanity, something that will get played along in the Daniel Craig series as we go further. But here is really as Vesper makes him word about how much he has ready to sacrifice of his emotions and his mental state in order to do this job. And he kind of gets taken back to reality, seeing her, someone who's not used to this, get so traumatized about what happens.
Yeah.
So she becomes his human connection, what grounds him, and also what helps him fall in love with her, because that part of his humanity gets reawakened.
So maybe we should talk what I think is the most impressive part of the movie. It's the fact that I made this card game interesting, understandable, and exciting. I think those scenes between those actors, Craig and Mads, first and foremost, is the highlight of the movie. And it's so simple when you think about it. It's two people, close-ups, and you have some playing cards. But essentially they sort of, if you think about it, there's only really 3 hands in the entire game that has any sort of relevance. The rest is mostly just, well, they sit down, there is a cross transition, and we realize some time has passed, and we see markers has changed hands. But the first is, of course, Bond tries to figure out Le Chiffre's tell when he's bluffing. So that's one. And then we have the other hand, Bond loses, and then one more hand where Bond wins. And that's it, really. The rest is just transitions, more or less.
Yeah, but you do kind of creatively use the dramaturgical tool of the 3x structure.
Yes.
You do have Bond dying, both losing and the fact that he's poisoned, have to restart his heart, coming back to life, winning and all that. So they kind of build it up like a short film in itself, like how the card game is structured. With also, you have the protagonist, you have the antagonist, you have supporting players. I think Jeffrey Wright adds quite a lot by being there as Felix as well, because you look how tired he's becoming. You think how he gives up, you kind of get the idea that this is a tasking game of poker that they are playing.
Yeah.
Bond and Le Chiffre need to stay on top all the time, but the other players add quite a bit, especially Felix Leiter.
Yeah, and one thing I got a kick out of when I read the book is some of the, not just the plot, but some certain lines has been taken directly from the book, including, of course, the drink recipe, which is mentioned in the card game.
3 measures of Gordon, 1 measure of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily, shaken rice, served in a deep champagne goblet with a thin slice of lemon peel. That's what it is in the book.
Yes. But the Felix line of keep the fruit is not in the book. But I think that was...
Exactly.
Yeah, and there was a couple of lines also later in the movie that gets I think that was really cool. Because I always wondered where that recipe came from, because it wasn't a vodka martini. It was later, of course, a Vesper martini.
Yeah, he names it in the book and he names it in the movie. There is a Vesper martini with all those ingredients in cocktail books, so I think it's really had a huge impact. Yeah,
I actually tasted one New Year's Eve. A friend of mine served me one, and it's a lot of booze in the drink.
Yeah,
you get hammered instantly.
Yeah, I kind of underestimated. Funny enough, on another New Year's Eve party I was at, I thought, yeah, I've had a few Vespers from time to time. One is fine. Then I decided, yeah, it's New Year's Eve. I'm gonna go for it. Oh dear, I shouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a strong drink. It's a strong drink.
It is for sure. I guess it helps Bond with the nerves or something, because after a couple of those, I think he wouldn't be able to focus on the game very much. But in the book, there is a lot of drinking, a lot of eating. I think that maybe one thing we can mention. There is this the idea is when you write a novel that the author should stamp his authority on the material, and you really feel when you read the book that this was Ian Fleming's life, not necessarily being James Bond going about saving the world, but you could really feel his description of how the food should be served, the clothes, the environments. You do get a sense that he knows exactly what he's talking about in the book.
Yeah, he kind of got accused of snobbery. I do remember one review for Dr. No, the novel, it's just a lot of sex and snobbery.
Yeah.
But yeah, Fleming is a man of particular tastes. Like,
for sure.
In the book, when he gets the Vespa, he kind of says, it would be way better if you used a vodka made of grain instead of potatoes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see where the snobbery thing comes from. But
yeah. And
it is really a life of fine dining, fine eating.
For sure. And I think, going back to the card game, I think I have played a little bit of poker, not Texas Hold'em, but I think also that's why the hands are very sort of over the top, because people instantly know that an ace is powerful, that a king is powerful. So it wouldn't really do with, if you watch like championship poker, you can win with two pairs, like a couple of twos and a couple of fours or something, but it wouldn't be very cinematic. So
yeah, I learned by the hard way. You do get from poker, from movies and shows, all that. Yeah, a straight is good, a house is good. Yeah, you need to go for those. But when you actually sit down and play, you do realize, hell, it's not easy getting those hands. And I never played for a lot of money. You know, basically $10 in.
yes,
Go away with 50 if you win. So no big deal. But you do realize, yeah, I'm gonna stick with these two threes.
yes. And also we should mention how this game is shot. Phil Mayhew, the cinematographer, talks about this. They started with they tended to do wide shots at first, but eventually as the game progressed, they went really close, and come the last hand is almost all close-ups on the Bond and Le Chiffre. But of course the real second hand where Bond loses is like the major next turning point. And we find out later, of course, that Vesper has been working with the bad guys. So they know that Bond knows his tell. But also in the book, Felix does chip in the last money so he can keep playing. But in the book, the card game is essentially just a couple of hours. It's two subsequent chapters, and there's no breaks or anything. I think they start pretty late in the evening and go for.
Yeah, it's like this part of the novel just simply goes for.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. Absolutely, and so Felix sort of gives him the money. He gets an envelope, and but Felix is never in the game in the book.
Yeah, and it works like I pointed out. We don't know that it's Felix Leiter if we watch a movie for the first time, or I haven't read anything about the cast.
Yeah,
we don't know it's Felix Leiter, so it's kind of a nice reveal that, yeah, it's me, your brother from Langley.
Yeah,
and I'm bleeding ships.
Yeah,
I can pay your way in again.
Yeah, and also,
so it's also kind of a nice way to establish that relationship, because in both the books and the movies, Felix Leiter is his best friend in the field.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also a good way of working also on the Bond-Vesper relationship, because she refuses to give him the money and he gets pissed off, of course. But then from a story standpoint, what you need to do is you have to reestablish their relationship, and then you have, of course, Bond is being poisoned by the Chief's girlfriend, and essentially Vesper comes along and saves him at the end. So that's another, it sort of serves a bit of the same purpose as the fight in the staircase. It brings them closer together.
Yeah, it kind of evens the field. Bond helps her and saves her in the first scene, and she then repays him the favor. And of course, after that, they have that dinner in the restaurant after he's won, where they emotionally reach the same level.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the third hand. And I guess it's kind of the filmmakers that didn't give in to the temptation to show a royal straight flush, which is the highest hand in poker.
That would have taken anyone out of the movie, because that is such a astronomically unlikely thing to happen.
Yes, and we talked about this. Come the last hand, Bond knows, when he looks at his cards, he knows that he has won, because there's no hand that can beat his the straight flush. So he's goading essentially Le Chiffre to go all in, because if Le Chiffre had folded, the game would go on. So Bond knew that this was his chance of winning the entire thing.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. What always gets me a kind of a little laugh is how he wins and he just slips over $500,000 to the croupier, and the croupier goes, "Thank you."
Yes.
It doesn't even flinch about "thank you."
Yeah. And I always wonder when the croupier sort of has that chip, how does he explain to the rest of this? No, this is mine. I didn't steal this. I hope someone from the casino was watching so they can sort of vouch for him. No, that is his money, actually.
Yeah, I think the guy, I don't know what it's called. I just call him Toastmaster because that's the event holder name I know. But
yes,
the guy with the mustache that kind of looks like the guy from West Wing. Mm-hmm. I think he is an official, so he knows that. Oh, yeah. He keeps the rules in check and all that.
Yeah. And then, of course, as I said, it is very faithful to the book, in a sense, again, with lots of updates. But Vesper does get kidnapped, and there is a car chase. But in the book, Bond uses his sort of supercharged Bentley to go after the bad guys. And he does end up crashing, but it's not because they have thrown Vesper on the road. Le Chiffre actually has sort of, I guess, almost like a Bondian invention. He has, they open his the trunk, and spikes come out, and I think it's a chain of spikes on the road.
Yeah, which is kind of funny to think about, that the first gadget in a Bond context is from the books, which are not that gadget heavy compared to the movies, and it's the villain that uses them. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. Actually, yeah, you have both the cane gun and this spikes as well. So so it's a kind of an interesting little trivia bit to have for you if you're ever in a pub quiz and that question pops up. They do it a bit more dramatic in the movie, having Vesper lying on the road after Bond comes out of a curve, so he has to swear off and crash. Yes.
So a bit more of a shock in the actual movie. I think it would have been a shock if you just do the spike mat thing as well, but I think they used it because it's pretty prevalent in the trailers. You do see that shot with Vesper on the road. Yeah. I think in every trailer of the movie.
Yeah, and of course there was I think that set the world record for spinning a car. I think it was 11 times the Aston Martin flips over, which was...
I think so. I think it may have been beaten since then, but it did set a record back then.
Yeah, and I know there was Aston Martin was very supportive, but in reality, that car has such good traction that the car would essentially just slide. It wouldn't flip over, but it's a spectacular scene, and you know, we of course then come to probably the most controversial scene, which is in the book, where Bond gets tortured. It's slightly different. But in essence, it is the same.
Yeah, his 00 scared of beating. I will always remember this scene. One, because it's tense, but it's kind of funny sitting in the audience in the cinema and you feel the silence from all the guys. And suddenly when the first hits goes and everyone goes...
Yeah. Yes. And in the book, Le Chiffre uses it's a carpet beater, but Bond is tied to a chair. Where they have sort of cut out the bottom. So, and reading the book, that's, if you remember, I mean, this is in the 50s. It's a pretty graphic sequence. all things considered.
Yeah, I think Fleming does use torches scenes throughout the novels, but I think this is the most graphical one.
Of course, and it is a mind game where they go back and forth. They were really, of course, acted beautifully, and essentially Bond realizes, as you mentioned before, that in the end of it all, he is expendable, because even if Le Chiffre kills him, his government will still welcome him with open arms with all his secrets.
Yeah, and what's also great in the novel is that it really puts James Bond down a peg, because he does realize that this is a simple game of Indians, as they call it in the movie. That it's not simply black and white. He is in a desperate situation now, just like the chief is in a desperate situation, but he has no way out of it. And he really begins to realize how vulnerable he is in this position as a secret agent.
It's sort of... I don't know if you agree with it, but I guess it sort of, in a way, mirrors the laser scene from Goldfinger, where Bond is going to get have the laser approaching his growing, and Bond eventually talks his way out of it. Here and he doesn't really talk his way. I mean, he sort of like stands up for himself, because he's not gonna. In the film, it's the code to the bank account, but in the book, it's where he has hidden the check. But he refuses to reveal it, and I guess it buys him time. And in the book, a Smersh agent shows up and shoots Chiffre. And in the film, of course, we have Mr. White, who we saw in the early in the movie in Uganda.
Yeah. It's kind of played for mystery in the film, but we do get a bit of conversation between the Smersh agent and Bond in the book that also starts making him question why he does what he does while he's in the hospital in the book.
Yes.
Even until he talks with Mathis, that he sort of gets back into it, and by the end, Vesper's death motivates him to actually continue on being an intelligence officer. Yeah, because I think it's important to have Le Chiffre remain somewhat unimportant cog in the machine as compared to a big boss in it. Because simply... in the book, it's played up quite a bit that Bond and Le Chiffre is kind of like that way, that there are a smaller part in a bigger machine. The movies don't play it up that as much. I think it's more placed perhaps in Quantum of Solace, actually, that relationship Bond has, as compared to what the book does, in what the movie chooses to take from the book.
Yes. And also, in the book, the torture scene actually has ramifications later on, because when Bond is in the hospital or recuperating, he has a lot of internal monologue, not to be too graphic, if his stuff will still work. And he has a lot of thoughts. I'm going to have to sleep with Vesper to see if I can still function as a man. Yeah. So that takes up a bit of the book, but that's not really referent, thankfully, in the movie. He does recuperate, of course, and that Mattis was a traitor wasn't really a thing in the book, and here it's sort of open-ended. We find out later in Quantum of Solace what the answer was, but obviously here it's sort of different.
Yeah, because what makes him chase after Vesper?
Yeah.
In the film is actually that he begins to realize Mathis has disappeared by then, and there were only two people that Bond had told about to tell: Vesper and Mathis. And here in the movie, he has just begin to get to know Mathis, so he doesn't trust him completely, because at that moment he thinks, oh shit, that couldn't be him. So that's why he's run after Vesper to see if she's actually meeting Mathis or is something else going on.
Yeah, and also in the book, Bond starts to think about his role in the world. In the scene, him and Mathis are having a conversation about what is good, what is evil, which was, I guess, quite actually... I didn't expect that reading the book, because it's sort of nuanced, that Bond essentially says, well, today the Russians are the bad guys, but what about tomorrow? Do they see me as the bad guy? Who is sort of a discussion on what is the essence of good and evil, and that's where Bond starts to doubt, am I really cut out for this? Which we don't get a whole lot of. We don't get that type of dialogue in the film, but we do feel his internal struggle anyhow.
Yeah, I think they kind of streamline it to put it more into Vesper. And how she talked to Bond and how they fall in love, and he starts that talk when she wakes him up and he starts talking about her stripping his armor and all that. They are opening up to each other. I think that's more play here than in the actual book, because in the book it's kind of rushed. It feels a bit rushed how they fall in love. You don't really get the motivation behind it. It feels quite much more trauma bonding more than anything in the book compared to what the movie does. Mm-hmm. So I think they throw that into the span that Mathis gets captured to end the question if he is a traitor or not, simply because the dialogue needs to focus more on Vesper and Bond, and they reuse that bit of dialogue more in Quantum of Solace in a few scenes where Mathis and Bond is talking.
Exactly. And then, of course, again, the film is pretty faithful to the book in the sense that, of course, Bond and Vesper start to hang out more. And in the book, they essentially go on a vacation, and she starts to get more and more paranoid, and Bond can't understand why. And I believe in one of the earlier drafts, before I think Paul Haggis came in, the idea was that Vesper would end her own life in the hotel where Bond wasn't nearby, and she would leave some sort of a message to him, and then he would go after the people that were behind all this, and then there would be this battle in the sinking house. But I think Paul Haggis felt very strongly that Vesper should be there because she was essentially his motivation or his purpose throughout the entire movie. So that was a major change from what we got in the book.
Yeah, but I do kind of feel that it gives Bond more urgency, and he's confused by what's happening when Vesper goes to take out the money, why she's doing all this. And we get to see the Getler, as he's called in the book, and in the movie you don't get to hear his name. You just see that he's the one who's been texting Vesper. So, yeah. But having her there, you do get to see the conflict in Bond. He's angry at her, but he wants to save her. So he has more urgency, I think, if you have Vesper present in the action climax. You get both the action climax and the emotional climax.
Yes. So
and I do think it's a better payoff that she leaves him Mr. White's contact number. Mm-hmm. And we do get the whole scene of him confronting him after after the dialogue scene with them.
Exactly. And also the sort of, what should we call him, the one-eyed man that shows up in Venice in the movie, he actually shows up in the book as well. I believe he wears an eye patch, and Vesper gets very rattled seeing him because she suspects that he's some sort of smirch agent, which he turns out to be. And I think maybe that's why because the chief in the book, he doesn't have a wound or this tear canal that bleeds blood. I do maybe they put that in there so it would be sort of mirroring the one-eyed man in Venice, because it sort of looks a bit like the chief. I actually thought when I saw the movie for the first time that he somehow survived and would be back now to get his money.
Yeah, I didn't confuse them, but it does bring up that question. Wait, who is he and all that? And then you see the money exchange. You start to put the pieces together in by yourself. I didn't really catch that connection that they both have problem with the eye. I think it's just simply that they wanted to give some attribute to Le Chiffre that made him stand out like a Bond villain of the past. You know, Renard feeling no pain, the webbed hands on Stromberg and all that. I think it just happened to be a coincidence oh right, we have that one-eyed guy.
Possibly.
Hopefully no one will know this.
Possibly.
But of course you did.
Yeah, I could be. Well, anyhow, he's sort of this one-eyed man essentially turns into I guess you could say the main villain, where the final battle. He's the sort of the stand-in for the main villain. I guess you could say that he had been pulling the strings all along with Mr. White. So essentially it is a fight against the main villain